And welcome in to the latest edition of Fourth Down in the Steel City. Hi, I'm Chris Mack alongside Josh Taylor, Greg Finley producing. We are ready to build the game plan for Steelers Rams Sunday afternoon at SoFi Stadium in LA. A chance for the Steelers to maybe build off of something going into the bye and now coming out of the bye. A chance for the Rams to maybe put some things together again on offense. Now they got all their receivers healthy. We'll talk about all of it, figure out how the Steelers pull out a dub in this one, and keep things moving forward in a positive direction because somehow they're still moving forward. A reminder, by the way, as we always do, that if you're watching the show on YouTube, all you gotta do is click that little notification bell and you will get notified as soon as there are new videos up at the 93.7 The Fan YouTube page, including full episodes of Fourth Down in the Steel City. If you prefer the audio-only method, nothing wrong with that. Wherever you get your podcast, make sure you follow or subscribe to Fourth Down in the Steel City, including inside our free Odyssey app, AUDACY. Download it today. Take us with you wherever you go. Josh, oh boy, it feels, I don't want to call this a big game. It's a non-conference game, non-divisional game. There's 12 weeks to go in the season, but it feels like if the Steelers are going to take advantage of some of the opportunities on their schedule, even though it may not be as big an opportunity as it looked a month and a half ago, this is still an opportunity for them to take advantage of a spot on the schedule where if they're going to be a playoff team at the end of the year, this is a game you ought to win.
It's a game that helps you for those intents and purposes as far as helping your record, because it could be the thing that has you a game ahead of somebody else as far as overall record. Because remember, when it comes down to, divisional standings and conference standings and playoff spots, overall record is what they use. So you want to have the better overall record. Now, granted, it's not a conference game, it's not a division game, so it won't help you in a tiebreaker. But winning this game helps you maybe avoid a tiebreaker. This is why it helps. It's kind of a bonus thing. Like, winning it helps you, losing it may not hurt you as much, but winning it definitely helps you. Now, as far as, the sentiment around town, the postseason implications, we know what those are. Now, as far as the aspect of the sentiment around town, you probably need to win this game, because it seems like anything short of a win over the next few weeks is not going to be good. I think anything that keeps this team at 500 or possibly worse is not going to be good, because this team is already 3-2 and the Sharks are circling, Chris. It's been that way. It was that way after they were 2-2 when they lost to Houston and the Sharks started circling. So now we see it's an opportunity to win a game. I agree with you. It probably doesn't hurt them, but in a way, it still does.
Yeah, I mean, every week is seemingly a referendum on everybody in Steeler Nation right now. Everybody, from Mike Tomlin all the way down to the very last 53rd man on the roster. Every week is a referendum when you're constantly right around that 500 mark, as they are, and not getting quite what you expect from just about everybody. But at the very least, you're as healthy as you've been in a while, and that should help the Steelers. So let's start where they get healthier than they've been since week one, really, on the offensive side, where Diontae Johnson is back. Pat Freiermuth is back. Say what you will about his blocking. We know that Kenny Pickett likes to find him through the air, particularly in the check down game. It looks like the offensive line will be as healthy as it's been all year, and we can discuss what it means for the left tackle position. That's a conversation we've had already a couple times this week, and we will continue to have all the way through whatever happens on Sunday afternoon and evening. But it's never a bad thing, I don't think, when you've got all 11 starters available to you and out there together, because all 11 of those starters are ultimately the 11 starters that looked really, really good in the preseason, for what that's worth. And we haven't had them together since, halfway through week one in the San Francisco game when Diontae Johnson went out.
That's fair. And it's one of those things where, you always have expectations for what you want your offense to do. But this is the first time since week one, like you mentioned, where everybody's on the field. now you're back to that level of expectation of what could this offense really, really do? Because now you have the best route runner back. Now you have your tight end who should be in theory a short yardage and goal line red zone weapon.
Right.
In Pat Freiermuth. You have him back in the lineup. Should he be on the field when you're trying to run the ball? Probably not. But that's beside the point. But you have those guys that at least help your passing offense, which still has not really seen its full potential yet, maybe get closer to it. Having a healthy offensive line helps your run game because we have seen flashes of what this run game could be. We saw flashes of it in the second half against Houston. We saw flashes of it against Baltimore. We saw flashes of it against Las Vegas. So you did see in small little chunks of what this run game could do. But you're right, a healthy offensive line helps that run game. So now you have your passing game that might have its full complement of weapons. You have a healthy offensive line that can help your run game. Now you're wondering if you can ever really make the sandwich that you've been hoping to eat. You ever made a sandwich and it just sits there for like an hour because you can't get to it?
Everybody can tell now that it's right around lunchtime as we're recording this.
And I haven't eaten lunch yet. But like, they made that sandwich during the preseason.
Yeah.
And then they set it down, and it's just been sitting there, and you never got a chance to eat it. And you're hoping that by the time you get a chance to eat it, it still tastes like a sandwich. I think that's where we are with this offense right now. This sandwich needs to come together and be eaten and still have flavor to it. Is the best way I could put this analogy together.
I'm so hungry now.
It's not your horror movie. It's not your horror movie analogy, but I'm trying to match it as best I can every time we get up here.
I'm glad you mentioned the run game too, because that's the meat in this sandwich here.
Yes, exactly.
And so because last year, and we asked this question last week as we hit the bye, can they do what they did last year post-bye this year? Bye's a few weeks earlier. We're in a different situation. There's not a rookie starting quarterback getting thrown to the wolves. We obviously still have our questions about Kenny Pickett, but here nor there, can they get back to the running game? When you look at the 4 weeks immediately following the bye last year, Steelers went 3-1. They scored 30 points in the one game they lost, which is the only time they've done that in the last year and a half.
Yep.
And Najee Harris averaged 4.6 yards a carry. That in and of itself was, I don't want to make it too simple, but that was the solution. It was get Najee Harris going in the run game, and that worked. They beat New Orleans. They at least kept it within a touchdown against Cincy, for what it's worth, but 30 points on the board. They beat Indy and Atlanta on the road. For what those are worth, they're still wins on the road in the NFL. I guess my point here is that if they could do it a year ago, should we not expect them to do it this year, given the amount of growth we should see, given that everyone is healthy? Maybe I'm asking for too much because this offense doesn't look as good as it did a year ago. Maybe my expectations are too high, but I have to believe that if they're going to capitalize on any kind of opportunity the bye may have presented them, it starts by leaning on the running game and actually getting some productivity out of it.
If my face looks a little bit tentative, I'm doing the math in my head between last year and this year. Maybe you swap out an NFC South schedule for an AFC South schedule. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the thing that probably evens this out, although you've already lost to an AFC South team that may be better than people give them credit for. But the thought still remains that you still got Indy, you still have Tennessee, and you still have Jacksonville on the schedule. You can win 2 of those games, probably, at least you should win 2 of those games without blinking, given where you're playing them, and in Tennessee's case, when you're playing them at home on Thursday night. But no, it's a great question because that's exactly what I'm looking for. The scenario you laid out is what I want to see because you're right. They came out after the bye week. It wasn't just the fact that they had the numbers for the running game as far as the production was concerned or the points that they scored. It was how they got there. Right. That's the thing that's important to me because they went out that first game after the bye against New Orleans. They came out. They were using the short to intermediate passing game. The running game was working. I think Najee Harris's first 6 or 7 carries, he had 30-plus yards. He was churning out yardage. They were moving the sticks, and they were getting points out of the offense. And that's what you wanted to see. I think we were dying for it then.
Yeah.
But not only were they doing that, they were running Najee Harris out of the pistol. They were running him north-south. And I'm going, wait a minute, who is this team and what have you done with the Steelers? We need to see more of that. You need to see some kind of creative change in the run game, some kind of solutions being found, and also getting back to that concept of using the short to intermediate passing game to help you open up your run game, or vice versa for that matter. And who better can you help do that by getting a Diontae Johnson back into the lineup, where in my opinion, that's where he's at his best, in the short and intermediate game. So you definitely need that guy back there too. And you need that rededication to the run game that they showed, because we talked about the second half of the season. Chris, out of those 7 games that they won, 6 of them they ran for 140 plus.
Yep.
So all of that kind of stacks together, and that need now may be more apparent and more imperative than it was last year.
And this will be, I'm just scanning the stat sheet right now, this will be the worst rush defense they've faced all year, just behind the Raiders, actually. So not far off from what the Raiders did. Yep. The Rams are the 11th worst in yards per game allowed rush defense in the league. So there's your opportunity right there. And I guess to your point, when you fold in Diontae Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, the short to intermediate passing game, start to put some drives together. When's the last time? How often do we see this team put together a drive? Like, go from their own 25 into the opposition red zone and then finish it off. I love big plays. Everybody loves a huge home run every now and then. But you know what? Get runners on the corners and give me a hit and run, and show me that you can play station-to-station baseball from time to time, because you're going to have to be able to do it if you're going to routinely put up points in the NFL. You got to put together a 6, 7, 8, 9-play drive sometimes.
Even a sacrifice fly that's well-placed.
Yes.
From time to time. Manufacture a run here and there.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they've got to do. And that's where I do suspect, and maybe this is, again, naive of me, but I am hopeful that Kenny Pickett is a little more calm back there, knowing that he's got Diontae Johnson and Pat Freiermuth to work with, that he can get rid of the ball quickly. If he's in a jam, he can count on one of them to be open and available. And then once you get that going, once you get the run game going, you get the short to intermediate game going. And it doesn't just have to be Diontae Johnson and Pat Freiermuth. No. You can hit George Pickens on a slant and watch him run. That's okay.
He's done it. He's capable.
But once you get that going, it does open things up on the back end for not just Pickens, but Calvin Austin as well. It all folds into what, again, we've said this how many times now? I feel like we're a broken record, but it's just true. How many times do we talk about what we thought the personality of this team was going to be coming into the year, and how they failed to actually find that identity somehow, even though, and again, this is another week. I thought Houston would be the week. I thought Baltimore would be the week. Every week feels like another opportunity to plug into that identity. Here we go. 11th worst, bottom third of the league rush defense. Yeah, it's on the road. Okay, yeah, it's Aaron Donald. I know that's intimidating. It makes sense. He's the best in the world.
Dominance incarnate.
Yep, but this is your opportunity to lean into the identity that at least you thought you wanted to lean into in the offseason. Here's another opportunity to do it.
I've been waiting for it every week, Chris. I'm sitting there going, is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen today? It's like checking your mailbox, waiting for that Amazon package to arrive at this point. But I couldn't agree with you more. And the word I keep coming back to, not a word that Mike Tomlin said, not even a word that Matt Canada said. It's a word that Kenny Pickett has said often. Balance. Finding balance in this offense. Because as everybody said, oh, you got to be able to throw the ball and do this. Or some say, oh, we got to be able to run the ball. Is it too much to ask for both? Is it too much to be able to throw the ball when you need to throw the ball and run the ball when you need to run the ball? Or if one isn't working well, be able to use one to leverage the other? That's what you hope for. I think that's what this offense wants. I think the problem is they haven't been able to marry the two. I'm going to come back to, once again, building the sandwich. They haven't been able to build the sandwich and pick it up and eat it. But for me, that's what it is. You got to find some level of balance here. And it may mean using some short passing game. Because like you said, Aaron Donald is going to be in Kenny Pickett's face quite frequently if they don't do something about it. And I'm going to say the same thing about this game that I said about San Francisco. And people looked at me weird when I said about San Francisco. If they fall behind 2 possessions, it's going to be a long day out west. You can't afford to let that happen. So you got to find a way to let this offense establish balance, but second of all, find a way to keep a guy like Aaron Donald out of Kenny Pickett's hair. That's something they cannot afford to let happen. And the best way to do that is using some plays that do what Houston did against this defense. Use their aggression to your advantage.
Yes.
Find some ways to take advantage of Aaron Donald If he's coming from one position, that means the space he was in is going to be occupied. Use that. Use some short crossing routes. Use something that actually negotiates the space that you have and manipulates what this defensive line might be able to do in getting after your quarterback.
Yeah, and that's where I come around to the offensive line, because it sounds like Dan Moore Jr. is going to get the start at left tackle based on the way they've practiced to this point. And just full disclosure, I know Josh is over there ripping out his hair.
I can't even grip it. I'm
mind blown emoji and all that. Full disclosure, it's about 2:30 Eastern on Thursday afternoon. So who knows? We may get a report on Friday that for whatever reason Broderick Jones is suddenly taken over at left tackle halfway through the week. I don't suspect that'll happen. I suspect Dan Moore Jr. is going to, for some reason, get the start at left tackle. Then it's Sayamalu, Cole, Daniels, Okorafor, the other usual suspects, because it sounds like Daniels will be back as well. What I'd like to see, and tell me if this is crazy and if it's too much, because I've always been a proponent of being a little more patient with offensive lines because you want to build the chemistry, right? You want those five guys to be like a dance troupe out there. They all know where the other one's going to be stepping at a certain point so that they can work cohesively. But this line just isn't good enough for that. I need guys who can actually block before we worry about putting together the dance routine. So put Broderick Jones at left tackle. I'd consider moving Dan Moore Jr. to right, but again, six of one, half dozen of the other with he or Chooks Okorafor on the right side.
Because one can do one thing and the other one can do the other thing, and no one can do both.
Exactly. Could we just rotate in and out? I mean, look, we already telegraph what the play is going to be based on where we line up the quarterback. Let's telegraph it with the right tackle as well. Why not? Dan Moore, get in there. It's a run play. Oh, sorry, it's a pass play. Chooks, get back in there.
Yeah, this offense does that too much already, so we don't need to do that we don't need to see them do that any more than they already do. But your point's well valid.
I mean, it's a thought. We're trying to do what we can to help Matt Canada at this point. Isaac Sayamalu on the left side. The one thing I would like to see, and we talked about this in the wake of, it was at some point during the bye week, which is really a week and a half that all melded together in my brain in like a 3-day window. Anyway, Mason Cole is not good. Mason Cole has not been good this year. Yeah.
He hasn't been this season. No, it's not even an exaggeration.
So I would have no problem at all. James Daniels played center in Chicago for a time, moving James Daniels over to the center spot and leaving Nick Herbig in at right guard because I think he played fairly well.
I thought he was a very viable replacement for James Daniels while he was hurt. I agree.
So my offensive line would be Jones, Sayamalu, Daniels, Herbig, Chooks, I guess, by default, left to right. I know they're not going to do that. I know they're not, but this in effect creates two conversations here. One is, they've got to do something about the personnel on the offensive line, and B, they've got to do something about. I mean, Mike Tomlin. What did he say on Tuesday about this is not a patient man's game? Something.
Not a patient man's business.
Yeah. If that's the case, then can we stop being patient with the offensive line? I need him to be more aggressive. We are reaching the point where if you come out of the bye and you're not seeing the progress in the offense that you thought may be possible coming through the offseason, the summer, camp, preseason, all of it, then you start to make moves. Or else it's insanity. You're banging your head against the wall over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yeah, it was interesting that Mike Tomlin made that statement about it not being a patient man's business, and he was talking about it from the player's perspective. But I'm with you. Maybe take your own advice here because, after a certain point, you could tell me that you're trying to, you might be saving some things for later or trying to, work towards the future and everything like that. But sooner or later, you got to find that point. You got to find that line of demarcation where you're no longer saving for later or no longer building for the future because the future has arrived.
Yeah.
Or that moment that you're saving for has arrived. And it's coming pretty quickly if it hasn't arrived already. I can't determine what that point is. That's up for them. That's up to them to decide. But I can't imagine it won't be, in the what's it say, in the windshield much longer before it's right on top of the hood. He's talked about in the windshield and in the rearview mirror. Yeah. That's a strong possibility. But I'm with you though. I want to see this offensive line, especially that left side. I want to see it reverse. Remember the Titans, left side, strong side. I want to see Jones and Sayamalu, those guys being really the anchor of this line, that both allows Kenny Pickett to have time to throw and maybe help set the table for Najee Harris. And if those guys can be the tone setters there and everybody else kind of melds in with them, I'm okay with that. But you got to make that decision, and you got to get there first. And it appears that we're not there.
No, they're still not for whatever reason. So, again, we'll see what the final alignment looks like on Sunday, but I suspect it's going to be the same five who started week one together. And most likely...
I'm holding out hope.
Yeah, I'm holding out hope too, but it's dripping. They're not dripping. It's falling through the hourglass. It's the days of our lives opening right now.
Sands through the hourglass.
The one thing
so
I do
are the days of this Steelers franchise.
It's hold on. What scene am I thinking of? There's a Jim Carrey scene. What is it? Oh, Bruce Almighty eroding.
Oh man.
The one thing I do take solace in is that I think we talked to go back real quickly before we flip sides of the ball to that short to intermediate passing game that you talked about earlier and brought up with Diontae Johnson back in the fold. I don't know how the Rams take both Johnson and Pickens out of the game. They can't. I don't think with their secondary they're capable of that. I think if they want to focus on one of the two, they can. And we'll see which way they go. If they focus on Pickens, if they want to bracket him all over the field, then hopefully that gives Diontae Johnson the ability to run some open routes more often. If they decide for whatever reason to lock down on Diontae Johnson, then hopefully that gives George Pickens the ability to run routes of all varying depths. But the best cover guy in their secondary is Akello Witherspoon, who, okay, he had his moments here.
Remember that name.
Yeah, but is not the kind of lockdown corner that a team really builds their fortunes on. So my hope is that they try to use Witherspoon to maybe neutralize Johnson a bit, and it gives Pickens the opportunity to run free a little bit more. But whichever one of those two guys is available, and it could be both, get them the ball.
How about we move these guys around a little bit too? Because this is another thing we saw in the second half of last season after the bye week. Instead of George Pickens just being on the outside running deep routes, you saw him in the slot. You saw him take some intermediate routes. You saw him run some seam routes down the middle of the field. Move him around a little bit. Move Calvin Austin around. Move him between the slot and move him split out wide. We know he can play outside. And we know he can make plays when he's outside. So that is something that you tinker with. Make them guess what you're going to do. Instead of just doing something that you think they're not going to see coming, put the pressure on them and make them guess what you're going to try to do. And then make them respond to what you're doing. You're on offense. Your absolute job by the root word of offense is to attack. So do that. Do what you're there to do. Attack the other team, find their weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and exploit them, and use the pieces that you have to do it. Because now that you have Diontae Johnson back, you have the capability of doing that. So do it while you can. And not to mention, you still got a guy like Allen Robinson. Is he a huge game breaker? No. But there have been times when Kenny Pickett's needed a reliable guy, and Allen Robinson's been a reliable guy. So use some of these guys, move them around. If you can't use them, use it to find a matchup somewhere that you can actually exploit.
Greg, what'd you jump in to give us?
I really like the opportunity for Freiermuth to have a big game. I look back at the Eagles-Rams game. I look back at the Eagles-Rams game. Dallas Goedert had 8 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown, and A.J. Brown had 6 catches for 127 yards. After that, DeAndre Swift had 38 yards receiving. Kenneth Gainwell had 7 yards receiving. Devontae Smith only had 1 reception. It was only 2 guys that burned the Rams defense. So you were talking about how you don't think the Rams can neutralize both receivers. I agree with you there. I think Pickens goes for a big game, and I think Freiermuth is going to go for a big game based on those numbers alone.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you got the guys to do it. Make them decide. Make them pick their poison as to who's going to beat them. If they're going to key on Pickens and keep everything deep and force you to keep everything short, that still helps you because you still got Diontae Johnson, you still got Freiermuth, you still got Najee Harris or Jalen Warren out of the backfield. You still got guys that can manipulate that part of the field. You just got to decide before they do is probably the critical thing.
Well, and they don't have great guys on the inside as far as coverage goes.
Right.
They just don't, the Rams. So that's a great point by Greg. They've got an opportunity to maybe exploit some things there. And hopefully, you work the middle of that field. It doesn't have to be deep balls down the seam or anything like that. Just 6-7 yards at a time. Find a rhythm with your tight ends, with your slot guys. And before you know it, you're actually, like we talked about, building a drive, getting yourself through the red zone, spreading the ball around, finding a rhythm with your quarterback. And who knows? I know this is crazy. This is maybe a first quarter touchdown.
Chris, this is something that Brooke Pryor from ESPN wrote about earlier in the season. This is not a league that's so reliant on the deep ball anymore. It is a short to intermediate trend right now that's moving through the league. Teams can beat you deep. Don't get me wrong. If they have the option, they can. Mm-hmm. But some are very comfortable with death by 1,000 cuts. Kansas City, and we might as well bring them up because people love to point to Kansas City and what San Francisco does and what Detroit does. They can beat you by death by 1,000 cuts. They don't mind doing that. If you're going to give them the option of the deep ball, fine. But they are going to layer their concepts and they are going to stretch things out horizontally and vertically to where they are going to find that place to just make that small little nick here, that small little nick there, and they're going to take small chunks of yardage. And more importantly, they're going to get their guys in space with the ball. So not only can they get a couple of yards as far as air travel with the ball, but maybe they're going to get some yards after the catch with the ball because they're exploiting the space around them too.
Yeah, and that's what I think the Rams do so well with Nakua and Kupp. I mean, both of those guys. And that in effect kind of flips the script for us and takes us to the other side of the ball. We'll see how they, again, brings us back around to the conversation about playing young guys. But we'll see how they elect to use Joey Porter Jr., how much they elect to use him. The one thing, and they're not going, well, I hope they consider putting Joey Porter out on the field to start the game. They probably won't. But I will say this, the one thing I think there's a chance for by the end of the year, I hope anyway, is that we're talking about Joey Porter Jr. on one side, Pat Pete or Levi Wallace working in the slots, and Darius Rush on the other side, who they just picked up off the Chiefs practice squad. We're talking about a poor man's Joey Porter Jr. This is a guy who has length, has speed, good closing speed in particular, if not breakaway burst. He's a fifth-round pick who they picked up off waivers midweek. I doubt we'll see him who knows with the way they handle this defense, if he'll be in the lineup or not this weekend. I would doubt they would throw him right in other than do anything but run down on special teams. But it feels like the first acknowledgement. Now, the first acknowledgement should have been more playing time for Joey Porter Jr., but at the very least, it's the first acknowledgement, tacit or otherwise, that Pat Pete and Levi Wallace aren't getting it done on the outside. They go out and they get somebody exclusively to play on the outside.
And honestly, if there's going to be a time to do it, I guess now is it. Do it now while you can, while there's guys out there, because it's not like they free themselves up that frequently. It's not, these situations are not the same. So I don't want people to say, oh, he's comparing it to this guy. I'm not. But this was another opportunity to go get a guy that helped your defense at the time. They did this in between weeks 2 and 3 back in 2019. Sean Davis got hurt. Happened to be a guy out there who wanted to get traded, and it turned into them acquiring Minka Fitzpatrick. So if you have the chance to get a guy that helps you, go get the guy that helps you. Don't pull the, well, we want to wait to do this, or it sends this message. If it's the thing that you need, go get the thing that you need. And if that's what they need to fix what's going on, then do that. And if he's ready to do it, if he's picking things up, if you think he's learning the defense, plug him in, because how much worse can it be at this point? I'd rather plug in a guy that's new, that's making mistakes because he doesn't know everything, than a guy who does know everything and it just isn't doing it. What difference does it make at this point?
It's interesting to see that again, sort of tacit acknowledgement that, yeah, we need to add something, because Desmond King was never going to be an outside guy for them, and it sounds like they've committed to moving on from him. I just nearly knocked over my laptop. That was fun. And so it's a move that midweek kind of floated under the radar on a national scale, but I think it will end up having a bigger impact if they end up using Rush down the line. As for this game in particular, when you have Kupp, when you have Nakua, when you have Atwell, I think if I'm the Rams, I'm looking to do exactly what we talked about a moment ago, which is exploit the middle of the field. Look, nothing against Cole Holcomb, especially, and Quan Alexander to a lesser extent. Good, solid inside linebackers, but not the guys I want running in coverage with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua 10, 15, 20 yards downfield. I would suspect Sean McVay and the Rams to try to exploit that.
Yeah, and that's even considering the fact that I think Quan Alexander and Cole Holcomb both have really progressed as far as their ability to make plays in critical situations. They're both doing that now, and that's important. But you're not wrong here. This is the one particular thing that scares me about this matchup. When you talked about those three receivers and what they can do, here's where they are really, really deadly. And it's something that doesn't really manifest itself. It doesn't always look that great until you see the end result. The Rams are third in the league in average time per drive. They're second in average plays per drive. They're fourth in average yards per drive. They're also ninth in third down conversion percentage. They're really good at sustaining drives.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing you want to see this defense being involved in is a sustained drive against this offense. That's where it's bad. And that's where these three receivers really become important. I'm telling you now, folks, if this game goes badly, you're going to hear a lot of talk about Mike Tomlin talking about the weighty downs. Because that's going to be where this defense sinks or swims. They're going to have to win on first and second down and get them into third and long situations where Watt and Highsmith can get after Matthew Stafford. And if they don't, it could get brutal. It is really important that they avoid that.
Here's the one thing, though, that I have yet to see. And look, I don't want to take anything away from this guy because you mentioned him earlier, and he is key to what they do on the back end. I haven't seen the big splash plays yet from Minkah Fitzpatrick.
He's not positioned to make them. He's
he's
doing
coming
other
up
people's jobs.
He's coming up in the box. He's playing the run. He's lining up in the slot. They got him doing too much of that because, to your point, he's trying to do other people's jobs. I need to see him put in a position to play center field and let him run with it. And that cascades down from, okay, move Peterson or Wallace inside and let Porter play on the outside and have some better coverage up front, and maybe even some better coverage in the box, in the slot, if it's Pat, Peter, Levi Wallace, even if the tackling may not necessarily be that much better in Levi Wallace's case. I'll take it. He's a corner, right? He's not here to tackle anyway, just like Peasy Jr. But let Minkah Fitzpatrick sit back there, read a quarterback, and make plays on the ball. We still haven't seen that yet this year. They have, in effect, and this, again, will come into play if, to your point, they are just death by 1,000 cuts on the Steelers this Sunday, moving the ball down the field 7.5 yards at a time with those receivers. If Highsmith and Watt are not making plays, the defense is getting hung out to dry. And
Houston showed us how to do that. They showed you how to neutralize those guys.
To perfection. And I can't imagine Sean McVay did not pay attention to that tape. They may not have the best running backs available to them this weekend. Doesn't matter. It may not matter. It dump it off on a little screen, and before you know it, you've picked up 8-9 yards. You're in second and short, and the entire play calling universe is your oyster to go after. Play action, another screen. Why not? Sure. Hey, it's working. Draws, anything. And that's where we saw the Steelers really get in trouble against Houston, is when the down and distance was manageable, for lack of a better way to put it, for the Texans. They could open up the whole playbook and do whatever they wanted to do. If that happens with the Rams and Stafford and McVay and this receiving core, that's, again, to echo your point of a moment ago, going to be bad because Highsmith and Watt can't do everything. They can't make every play. They can't win every series for you. They can't be counted on to win every other game for you. And it still feels like this defense is in that place where even if they maintain, right? Even if they give up, I don't know, let's say let's say they give up 20 to the Rams. I don't think that's a bad showing. I'll take a 20-point day against the Rams. It's still going to put them in position where, A, they've got to ask their offense to do more, and B, 20 points is this far from one big play. We haven't even talked about the big play capability. One big play from turning into 27, and the Steelers aren't scoring 27. Right. There's too much counting on the upper end of this defense to make plays for you. And I worry that if they get hung out on long drives, they're not going to be – they just won't have the gas in the tank to make those plays, especially late in the game.
Keeping it to 20 points is going to be the preferable end of it. That's going to be as far as that sliding scale goes, as far as that comfort zone. Once you get past 21 to 22 points, that's when it can get a little hairy. But when this team is able to hold teams, especially 20 or less, 24 is kind of where like you start to get into that yellow area.
Yeah.
But if you keep it to 20 or less, we've seen them do it almost 4 years now running. They keep teams at 20 or less during every game they play, and they win more often than they lose. So even if you got to do a lot of bending, if you got to be Stretch Armstrong and Gumby's child, as far as being able to bend and not break, that might have to be your game plan. Because if there is a major critique I could have toward Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin and what they've done with this defense, or maybe struggled with doing, it's the fact that they continually find guys to bring in that are supposed to help alleviate the problems on the back end, and those problems don't seem to be alleviated as much as they should be. Who was the last guy that did it? Was it Joe Hayden? Joe Hayden and Minka Fitzpatrick? Are those the guys? Because here's the thing. That's only two of an entire host of guys that they've brought in over the years that are supposed to help alleviate the problems on the back end, and they haven't been alleviated. So now we're to that point where this is as critical mass as it gets as far as finding guys who can, and we're not talking about jumping in front of every other pass and bringing it back for a pick six, but we're talking about simple stuff. Tackling the ball, keeping guys in front of you, just limiting yards after the catch, getting open field tackles and keeping them to short completions that don't become third down conversions. Right. You got to do some of the small things on this defense to keep you in this game. And then you can talk about maybe standing under that 20-point cushion and keeping it comfortable for your offense.
I will be curious to see. There's, I don't know if we'll call it revenge game aspect, but let me show you what I'm capable of aspect of Kevin Dotson. Starting at guard for the Rams. And Kevin Dotson right now, I know we take PFF rankings with a grain of salt, but Kevin Dotson right now is ranked out of 79 guards in the NFL, number 1 overall. So,
and I'm not taking anything away from Kevin Dotson. And there's this talk out there like, what's with these guys leaving the Steelers and being good? Folks, Kevin Dotson's gap was the one that was blitzed twice when Kenny Pickett got concussed, both times last year. Them getting rid of him was warranted. It was a warranted move. You can't have your quarterback that you drafted in the first round getting knocked out of games twice because the same guy can't defend his gap. That's some of that is just fundamental common sense thinking here. But the fact that, to Kevin Dotson's credit, the fact that he's gotten another opportunity with another team under another offense with a new head coach, and he's making the most of it, good for him. But I'm tired of the whole, they got rid of this guy. He obviously wasn't that great here. Yeah, he wasn't great here. And they got rid of him because he wasn't great here. But he got another opportunity. He's making the most of it. Good for him. This whole the fact that he's doing better there is obviously a detriment to his time here. No, he was the guy on the field not playing well. That's on him. And if you're going to get better and try to make the best of another situation because you got another opportunity to play, it's on you to make the best of it as well. So yeah, good on him. But at the same time, he's still got to put up with the guys that they put out in front of him. So hey, we'll see when the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Throw another Tomlin idiom in there because now
there we go.
Now you got to see what they're dealing with and how well they use him and how well he responds to it.
Here's one thing I am really curious to see on Sunday, and it's almost as much because I don't know why this is happening. Matt Stafford, I've seen some people talk about how Stafford is not as bad as some people would make it out to be, or Stafford is bouncing back this year from Matt Stafford's just kind of there. Like he's not Ryan Tannehill level bad. He's not. he's just kind of there. He's got an 83.5 quarterback rating right now, 6 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 1,600, almost 1,700 yards, 61.2 completion percent. So he's just kind of there. And
he's been sacked 16 times.
That was the final point I was going to get to, is that when he's there, he's really there. He's not going anywhere else. Yeah. Because Matt Stafford is a statue. So if you can get any kind of pass rush Sunday, you're talking about neutralizing those receiving weapons the Rams have. Well, don't let Matt Stafford get the ball out of his hands, and that's step one to neutralizing the pass game.
One other number that's really important when you're analyzing Matt Stafford, he's also 35.
Yep.
He's passing that point to where quarterbacks, some might be good, but they're not what they were. And Matthew Stafford, if there's one thing that he had that really separated him from other quarterbacks, he always had elite arm talent. Like Matthew Stafford, especially in his early years in this league, he could get the ball downfield. He could let it go. And it didn't hurt being in Detroit, having a guy like Calvin Johnson. When you got Megatron, and you can throw it deep, and you know Megatron can make plays deep, you're going to look good a lot. And you're going to be able to make plays a lot. And that's exactly what happened in Detroit. But at the same time, being in LA, it felt like a resurgence for him because, you had Sean McVay's scheme, you had Cooper Kupp, you brought in an Odell Beckham Jr. who played really well up until that point in the Super Bowl where he tears his ACL. So you had things around you that made that offense work for him. And Cooper Kupp's pretty much the only one left. Like he's the only real ingredient left from that group. And he's trying to make the most out of that too, while probably not still being the quarterback that he was in his better years. So all of that makes for a much different looking Matthew Stafford than maybe we've seen in the past few years.
So who knows? Maybe TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith can end up stealing another game. It's always possible with those two, and especially with an older, highly immobile quarterback like Matt Stafford.
To be fair, I know Mike Tomlin said this was a football lifetime ago. The last time these two teams met, the defense stole the game. Minka Fitzpatrick was the guy.
Yeah.
I think he had a couple of takeaways in that game. He was the guy that took this game over. So, yeah, it's going to be necessary for sure.
We'll see how it plays out on Sunday afternoon. Sunday night, we'll have a new post-game edition of Fourth Down in the Steel City for you to break it all down and talk about where the Steelers stand. Either 3-3 and woe is us, the sky is falling, or 4-2 and oh my God, everything's well with the world again.
No, the sky will still be falling even if they're 4-2. Let's not kid ourselves. This is still Pittsburgh.
You're right. Who am I kidding? Make sure you follow and subscribe Fourth Down in the Steel City. However you get your podcast, including inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY. Download it today and take us with you wherever you are. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. We appreciate it very much. For producer Greg Finley, for Josh Taylor, I'm Chris Mack. Don't forget, we'll have our picks out for you this weekend as well. Hot sheet right around the corner, too. And we'll get you ready. Continue to build up for Steelers, Rams, and then break it all down for you after the fact right here on Fourth Down in the Steel City.